Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in. We will get started shortly. We still have some people that are tuning in this morning and joining, so we will get started here probably in a couple minutes. Thank you. Good morning, Heather. You're welcome. Thanks for joining in. Okay. All right. So again, everyone, good morning. Thanks for tuning in. I am showing 8:31. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I know some people are still trying to get in this morning. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on my webcam so you can see who I am. So again, good morning, everyone. You should be able to see the screen. And if you're here tuning in this morning on the webinar on what's next for businesses, we're going to be talking this morning about the stimulus package updates and tax changes. Some of the topics that we're going to cover this morning are funding updates. We're going to go over EIDL loans and the advance under EIDL. We're also going to talk about PPP forgiveness. The biggest topic this morning is PPP updates. As many of you know, there's been a lot going on with that. And then I've got a guest presenter that is joining me this morning, and I'm going to introduce him after my presentation this morning. And then we're going to get into Q&A. So we've got a lot to cover this morning. What I will tell you is, as you have questions, to please put them in the questions box. We will get to as many questions as we possibly can at the end of this webinar. So again, everybody, I hope you can see my screen. And Jason, will you just tell me you should be able to see my logo? Is that what you're seeing right now?
Yes.
Perfect. So again, everyone, good morning. My name is Monica Coburn. I'm the founder and managing director of Nevada Business Advisors. We're a Las Vegas-based business advisory firm, and we've been hosting these webinars since shortly after COVID last year. So we are bringing these webinars to you on a variety of business topics. And as we did last year, we started out with talking about the federal disaster relief programs that rolled out last year. And so we're starting the new year by talking about the new updates. My background, just to give you a little background about myself, I come from a strong commercial banking and lending background with over 20 years. I've been involved with financing and advising thousands of business ventures from startup to growth and expansion. And last year, I'm very proud that we actually assisted over 250 Nevada-based businesses with their EIDL and their PPP applications. So we came into the picture when banks started not being able to accept any more applications. And so we were able to tap into our lender network out of state, and we were able to help these businesses. Just a disclaimer this morning is our presentation, and my presentation is based on a number of things. It's based on research, it's based on public information, and of course, some professional insight. And as always, information is subject to change. We saw that last year as the programs rolled out. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's talk about numbers. I'm gonna turn off my webcam for this portion, just so that there's no distraction. So last year, under the CARES Act, there was $660 billion in economic relief that went out to small businesses. This happened through the EIDL program, PPP, the Business Loan Debt Relief Program. And approximately 1.1% was identified as fraudulent transactions. And you know, it's a given. I mean, anytime you've got lending or finance involved, fraud is going to happen no matter what. But when the program rolled out, that's the percentage that has been identified thus far as fraudulent. And there was a number of reasons for that, but we won't get into that this morning. Approximately 280 million of this funding remains undispersed. So when it says undispersed, it could be for a number of reasons. Either SBA may be waiting on information, or the lender may be waiting on information and the funds have already been allocated. So it's a number of reasons why that number is the way it is. Now, under the new stimulus package, $325 billion has been allocated to provide additional assistance to the hardest hit small businesses, nonprofits, and live venues. There's separate legislation that addresses the live venue piece. I'm going to gloss over it this morning because most of the attendees this morning are small businesses and not live venues, but I'll just I'll gloss over it briefly. Important to note that this allocation is less than half of what was provided last year. I'm a number person, so I wanted to share with you what the breakdown of this looks like. So as you can see, the majority of the funds have been allocated for PPP for second draw loans. $15 billion for grants for live venues, theaters, museums, zoos. The EIDL Advance, $29 billion of that has been allocated for that program. But of that number, $20 million will go to the SBA Inspector General, $3.5 billion for the 7A Debt Relief Program, and then $2 billion for SBA lending enhancements. So as you can imagine, last year, I mean, SBA was not prepared software-wise, platform-wise, technology-wise, with the flood of applications. And so they have been making improvements throughout the year. Part of this money will go towards that. They've had to hire additional people to help on the processing and on the back end. So just FYI breakdown, but let's get into what's happening as far as the EIDL program, or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the updates. I'm going to rewind a little bit for those that may be on the call and not familiar with what EIDL was. When the EIDL program came out last year, it was part of SBA's disaster relief program that was typically for hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, right? This was a part of that program. And so these were low interest rate loans of up to $2 million, where principal interest would be deferred and be able to help businesses pay for expenses had COVID not happened. Now, what happened last year is they didn't have this cap, but due to the high demand, SBA put a cap of $150,000 on these EIDL loans. So the EIDL loan portal was up, it shut down last year, and then it's been up again, accepting applications for several months, and it continues to remain open. So for those of you on the call that may not have applied for an EIDL loan and you are eligible to apply for one, I will show you that link later in this presentation. So who's eligible for EIDL? 500 or fewer employees, so proprietors, whether or not you have employees, independent contractors. So this came up a lot with questions. You know, can I claim my 1099 for payroll costs? And the answer is no, because they can apply on their own. And all of these other businesses that you see here, co-ops, agricultural, tribal, again, you have to meet the size standards according to SBA, and as well as most private nonprofits of any size. So what has changed with EIDL? Well, specifically the EIDL Advance. Last year, if you had applied for the EIDL program, you had the opportunity to check a box saying, yes, I want this advance. And that was free money to you. It was like a grant. Last year, that would have been a deduction from your PPP forgiveness amount, and that amount would not have been forgiven. As part of the new legislation and update, that advance is no longer a deduction. So that's good news. Now, if you are a borrower and you've already applied for PPP forgiveness, What this next bullet point means is if you applied and you received your forgiveness already, then guess what? If that advance was deducted, that means you don't have to pay that deducted amount back. You would be made whole. Businesses have been asking, are they going to be getting a refund? And as of right now, the answer is no. This is how SBA is dealing with this piece. There is a new targeted EIDL advance, and I'm going to talk about that briefly next. So who is eligible for the targeted EIDL advance? So this is going to be a year-end COVID-19 relief legislation which just passed that is going to provide additional funding for targeted $10,000 grants through this program. So who's eligible for this? Entities that are eligible for the EIDL and applied during the covered period from January 31st of last year through December 31st of this year must be located in a low-income community as defined by the IRS code, which you can see here, section 45DE, had an economic loss of greater than 30% and employ less than 300 employees. So you must meet all of these criteria in order to qualify and be eligible for that targeted EIDL advance. So some additional updates, so we just talked about this, is a $10,000 grant to eligible applicants in low-income communities that did not secure grants because funding ran out. But what about people that applied for the EIDL advance and maybe did not get the full 10,000? So there is a clause that you are eligible to receive an amount equal to the difference of what you received and the 10,000. So if you got an advance for 2,000, and let's say you can qualify to get more, this is what this is talking about. So this is the update to that piece of the legislation. So if you've not applied for an EIDL loan yet, the applications are still being accepted. This is the link. It's covid19relief.gov. That will take you directly to the SBA's website and to the application link. Now, as far as the EIDL advance and the grant portal, according to SBA, applications are going to be made available by January 17th. So that's in a few days. Now, of course, it's subject to change. This is what it was as of yesterday. So let's talk about PPP forgiveness and how do you apply for forgiveness for those of you that got your PPP. Well, first of all, before you can apply for forgiveness, you must have used all of your loan proceeds. If you do not apply for forgiveness within 10 months after the last day of your covered period, then according to SBA, those payments are no longer deferred and you're going to have to start making your loan payments. Now, the lenders and the banks, whomever you got your PPP funding through, are being in contact with their customers. So again, you just want to keep in close contact with them about applying for forgiveness. There's a lot of businesses that still have yet to apply. So what if your loan was more than $450,000? Contact your lender, complete the form, get the required documentation, including your payroll and your non-payroll, and submit this to your lender. And like I said, lenders are going to be contacting their customers directly where they should be. So what's the update on forgiveness? We've been hearing a lot about the simplified forgiveness process. So here it is. If your loan is between $50,000 and $150,000, it's been simplified. And what that means is a one-page certification attesting that you've provided all the information, that it's accurate, and that you complied with all the PPP loan requirements. It's an SBA form that you'll have to sign off on, and that should be it, a one-page form. Now, on that one-page form, it will ask the number of employees you were able to retain because of the covered loan, your estimated total amount of the loan spent on payroll costs. Because remember, the key purpose of PPP was to retain employees. So they're interested in what did you spend on payroll costs and the total loan amount. Now, depending on your bank or lender, they may require additional certification or information. For example, I know some banks have their own form in addition to the SBA form. So that's just an example, but it's going to be a simplified process. So if you're between 50,000 and 150, that's what you can expect. Now, this is where my input comes in, is while no documentation is required to apply for the simplified forgiveness, per SBA, bars are required to retain their records for employment related for 4 years, other records for 3 years. Now, I said seek advice from your tax advisor and record retention. If it was me, I would keep those records as long as I need to. I wouldn't go by the 3 and 4 years rule that SB is saying, because again, things are subject to change, and this is a government guaranteed program. So let's talk about the big topic of the morning, which is the PPP update. So I started off with the question and getting the elephant out of the room, which is, can I take out a second PPP loan for those of you that already got a first one? And here we go. So you are eligible to take out a second draw, a second PPP loan up to $2 million if you are a business, eligible nonprofit, housing co-op, tribal, self-employed, sole proprietor, independent contractor, all of the above. Eligible destination marketing organizations or eligible news. So you must not have employed more than 300 employees. You need to have used or will use the full amount of the first PPP prior to application, and have experienced at least a 25% revenue reduction in 2020 relative to 2019 by quarter. So for example, if you looked at your second quarter P&Ls of 2019 and you look at your second quarter of P&L for 2020, that is what they are going to compare. Now you can select any quarter, but it needs to show the comparison. Some exceptions apply, and so I'll just cover one of them as an example. If you purchased an existing business and you did that before February 15th of 2020, so let's say you purchased it in January 1st, right? Then the numbers that you're going to be comparing are 2020 numbers. So that's an example of one of the exceptions. And of course, as always, you want to check with your lender. How is loan size determined? So a lot of this has not changed. So the 2.5 times of your average monthly payroll costs remains the same. With seasonal employees, the calculation would be based on a 12-week period between February 15th of 2019, February 15th of last year. Now, here are the updates. The maximum loan amount for second draw PPP loans is $2 million. When it was a first draw last year, $10 million was the maximum. And so with this new round, it's $2 million maximum. Now, if you have yet to apply for PPP, you will be able to do so once applications can be accepted through regular institutions and banks. Right now, it's in a phase, they're doing it in phases, right? But if you've never received PPP, you will have the opportunity to do so. But for the second draw, it's maxed at $2 million. Here's the other big significant change is based on your NAICS code. So This is what was classified as the hardest hit businesses, were businesses that were in lodging, accommodation, hospitality, food service. Your industry code must start with a 72. And if it does, then you become eligible to get 3.5 times of your average monthly payroll costs. Now, there's been a lot of questions that I've come across from clients and other businesses that have said, well, I'm in the trade show business. I support hospitality. And the answer is no. Your industry code must start with 72. So even if you are a supporting business to these industries, it's the industry code that will drive that 3.5 times number. Many of the terms for the second draw PPP remain the same. So the SBA will continue to guarantee it at 100%. No collateral, no personal guarantees are going to be required. The maturity is going to be for 5 years. The interest rate is still 1%. There's still a waiver of affiliation rules that applied during the first round of PPP. It's going to be the same with the second. And businesses with multiple locations that are eligible entities under the first round of PPP would be eligible as long as you do not employ more than 300 employees per physical location. So this is especially for restaurants. A restaurant owner that had multiple locations, they could do it, they just could not exceed 300 per location. So what's eligible under second draw PPP? A lot of the same. So I'll cover it briefly. You know, payment for vacation, you know, payment of any retirement benefit, compensation. So these are the same costs that were eligible the first time around. What's new that you can include? Employer provided group insurance benefits like group life, disability, vision, or dental. So this is a new update than what was last year. What is not eligible? This is the same as last year. So employee owner compensation over 100,000, taxes imposed or withheld under these IRS codes 21, 22, and 24. If you have employees that you paid that reside or their principal residence is outside of the US, they are not eligible. And then qualified sick and family leave under section 7001. So what can you use the funds for? A lot of this is repeat again. So your payroll costs, payments on interest of mortgage obligations, rent, utilities, what is covered. So here are the new updates. There's 4 new covered expenditures under the new round of PPP. So starting with covered operations expenditures. So if you as a business have had to do any kind of software, cloud computing, so think of all the remote workers, Zoom, right? GoToWebinar, you know, tracking of payroll, inventory, HR, any of that would be covered under this operations expenditure line item. Next is covered worker protection expenditure. So think of PPE, right? Anything that needed to include in your workspace, in your office. Think of protective barriers, anything like that to protect your workers would be covered, right? Masks, gloves, all of that. That is part of that. Personal property damage. So, you know, we saw this last year with all the rioting and the protests that were happening, that there were properties that got badly damaged. So SBA added this, that if you had a property damage as a result of a riot, a protest, a public disturbance that occurred last year that wasn't covered by insurance, you can include that as an eligible cost. And last but not least are covered supplier costs. So supplier expenditures that were part of a contract, a purchase order, you had to order goods, and this is before taking out the loan in order to have your business operate. costs for perishable items. So think of the restaurants, right? That had to order inventory for their restaurants, then they had to close. All of those perishable goods were no longer good. And then they had to reopen, and then they had to close. So, you know, I'm going to get off my soapbox here, but that's giving you an example of these supplier costs that can be eligible under the new PPP draw. So what documentation is required? A lot of the same thing, right? So your payroll information. Now, if you're going for second draw PPP, no additional documentation to substantiate your payroll costs is required if you use calendar year 2019 to determine both the first and second draw loan amounts instead of 2020, and you use the same lender for both loans. If not, then it's the same information that you provided the last time with payroll information, right? And then they're also going to want to see that comparative quarterly financials on seeing if there was a reduction of at least 25% in revenues. So here's an update. If your loan is greater than $150,000, and this is what I just talked about, you must also submit documentation that shows that 25% or greater revenue reduction last year compared to 2019. The bank may ask for bank statements, they may ask for other information, but this gives you an idea. If your loan is less than $150,000, then revenue information must be submitted on or before the date you apply for forgiveness. If you did not apply for forgiveness, SBA may still require the information, but again, check with your lender. Wow, I know that was a lot of information. You know, try to condense it as best as I could. And we are going to have time for Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, put them in the question box. But now, I'm really excited to introduce our next guest presenter, and I want him to know how much I appreciate him being here this morning. We're talking about a CPA who's at the beginning of a tax season, but also having to keep up with all the stimulus and tax updates. So Jason Payan is a CPA with his own firm of Payan & Payan CPAs. He specializes in income tax planning, research, and structuring for corporations, partnerships, and individuals. In the last 18 years, he served clients in the areas of real estate development, home building, restaurant operations, golf course operations, and gaming. He has 6 years of public accounting experience with the Big Four Public Accounting and is a graduate of our very own UNLV with a master's in taxation. Additionally, he's a member of the Nevada Society of CPAs and the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Jason, thanks for being here this morning. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great,
so
thank you.
Take it away.
All right, thank you, Monica. I appreciate it. Can you confirm that you can see my screen? I just want to make sure before I launch in.
See it. I can see it. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I greatly appreciate it. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about will cover some of the things Monica already covered. I'll give a little bit more detail behind what she said, but we realize there's going to be numerous questions after this. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, the new law that just got passed, was over 5,000 pages in length. So it's a little unreasonable for us to try to condense it down into a few slides and present it here within 60 minutes. But, you know, we're going to give you the top level information, and then whatever questions you guys have, please feel free to give me a call. My contact information is here on the screen, not only my phone number, but my website where you can email me. I can even send you a copy of these slides if you have questions. All right, so let's go ahead and launch in. Again, here is all of my contact information. Easiest way to get a hold of me is via email from my website, which is p2cpa.com. All right, so a couple of disclaimers that I want to talk about. The information that I'm going to go over is current as of yesterday. Now, I haven't looked to see if there's been any changes overnight. I don't think there has been, but there very well could be. This is the time of year where we get changes on the daily. So what I tell you today may change tomorrow based upon guidance issued from the SBA. So as we had mentioned before, sometimes the language in the law is a little vague, so we have to rely on SBA guidance. They are the authority. Whatever the SBA says is what we have to go with. The SBA also continues to issue guidance. Last Friday, the SBA issued 2 massive interim final rulings that gave us a lot of information. There are still some unanswered questions to a lot of things, but we just have to keep watching it and monitor that. Then lastly, as Monica mentioned, check with your lender. The lenders or the banks are the ones that are implementing this. So a lot of what the SBA says, the banks may come in and say, yes, that's great, but we also want additional information to support the application. And so not only do we have to comply with what the SBA says, you're going to ultimately have to comply with what your lender requires. So just be aware the lender may ask for additional documents and information. So today I want to go over some of the recent developments in not only individual but business taxes that happened under this new act. I want to talk about some of the changes, some more of the detailed changes in the PPP program. I want to talk about the simplified PPP loan forgiveness process, and then a couple other considerations at the end. So first off, with regards to recent developments on individual taxes, most of you guys have heard that the Congress has approved additional $600 in an economic impact payment to all individuals, all qualifying individuals, I should say. This is also referred to as a stimulus check. It's not really a stimulus because we're not trying to stimulate something, we're trying to just save something here. And so the IRS has begun sending out those checks. Some of you may have already seen the deposit go into your bank account if you reported a bank account on your 2019 tax return. If there was no bank account information reported on that return, then the IRS will mail out your check. So if you don't, there are some questions with regards to, hey, I didn't report a bank account, I never received the original check from back in the spring, how am I going to receive this check now? You can go to the IRS website here at irs.gov, and up at the very, very top of the screen, there's a link that says Get My Economic Impact Payment. If you click that, you can submit your bank information. You can, from what I understand, I've not verified this, but what I understand is you can update your bank information. And it's imperative that you do this before January 15th. After January 15th, which is this Friday, the IRS is no longer going to be accepting changes via this Get My Economic Impact Payment link on their website. And the reason for that is if you, for whatever reason, didn't qualify for the spring check or the economic impact payment now, you will qualify to receive that check on your 2020 tax return. So that will be a credit that you apply for on your individual 2020 tax return, and the IRS is going to be starting to accept those tax returns the week after January 15th, which is the week of the 18th, I believe, is when they open the e-file portal to start filing individual returns. So we have a very little time in order to input your bank information or try to resolve any issues with the IRS with regards to that. Some of the other changes that have happened with regards to individual taxes is we can now use your 2019 information in order to claim the child tax credit or the earned income credit if that would result in a higher credit rather than using your 2020 income or adjusted gross income. So we'll have to monitor this on a case-by-case basis and see, all right, if we used your 2020 income to claim these credits, is that going to produce less credit than if we used your 2019? And so we have that option. So that is good. Charitable deductions. Back in the spring, Congress allowed us, for those individuals that do not itemize, they allowed those individuals to claim a $300 above the line deduction for charitable donations. That has now been extended not only for 2020, but also through 2021. So if you file single, you can claim an above the line $300 charitable donation. If you are filed joint, you can claim a $600 above the line charitable donation. Now keep in mind, you must actually donate cash to charities. This is not just, hey, we're going to let you claim a deduction. So there are penalties affixed to this. If you claim a fraudulent deduction and things like that, they are enhanced or greater penalties for essentially not telling the truth on your tax return. So you want to make sure that you do, in fact, have these donations, you have donated cash to charity. And then lastly, the Congress did extend the unemployment benefits through March 14th this year. It will cover not only traditional employees, but gig workers or self-employed individuals as well. I don't have much information on that other than call the state unemployment office. My hunch is the state is going to be a bit behind because they're going to have to reprogram their computers and get up to date, but hopefully they were expecting this, but you'll want to call the state unemployment office to get more information. So let's move on and now talk about business taxes. What are some of the recent developments in the business tax side? So under this new law, any PPP money, and that is either PPP1 or PPP2, or what they're calling second draw PPP, if any of that or all of that is forgiven, it is not considered income. Now, we knew that going in, but what a lot of people didn't realize is shortly after that was passed, the IRS came out and said, yeah, that's great. We understand that it's not income. We are going to treat it as tax exempt income, which meant that any expenses spent with PPP money would not be tax deductible because it was spent with tax exempt income. And so really it created this, well, it's not income, but really it kind of swings back on the backside and does become income because you weren't allowed to claim any of the expenses. Now that also has been overturned. So now we do not have to report PPP forgiveness as income, and we still are allowed to deduct any expenses that we use PPP money for. So this is a huge, huge benefit. In addition to that, for those that are fairly technical, we will also be allowed a basis increase for those that have S corporations or partnerships. You will still be allowed a basis increase for this PPP forgiveness, which is kind of a third benefit that a lot of people weren't talking about. So that is helpful. As Monica mentioned, the EIDL grant money. So for those that listened to Monica and I way back in March and in the spring when all this was happening, and we said, hey, go out immediately and apply for an EIDL grant. If you did that and you got money on that, that was just deposited into your bank account, you qualified for up to $10,000 based upon the number of employees you had. If you got that, great, it's forgiven. It's not going to affect in any way your PPP forgiveness process or your forgiveness amount on the PPP side. Now, I did just read from the SBA, and we'll have to verify this, and Monica may have to double check, or we may have to look into this, but it's my understanding that if you already applied for PPP forgiveness and you got it, and you also got the EIDL grant, so in other words, your PPP forgiveness was reduced by that idle grant and you ended up with a small PPP loan, the SBA is working and going through their client list, shall we say, and trying to find all these clients or all these taxpayers. They will end up refunding the money to the lender so that it full pays your remaining PPP. If for whatever reason the refund to the lender exceeds the existing loan amount, the lender then would need to refund you as the taxpayer the overpayment. So the SBA is, from what I understand, going through that process, and they will refund and make whole this idle grant if you've already applied for PPP forgiveness. Business taxes were next bullet point down. Business meals. So a lot of you may have heard about the 3 martini lunch deduction. This is what I'm referring to here. So for tax years 21 and 22, any business meal that you have, you will be allowed to deduct 100% of that meal. So historically, business meals have been subject to a 50% limitation. In other words, if we go out and spend $100 on lunch, we are only allowed to deduct $50. Well, now, at least for 21 and 22, we will be allowed to deduct the full $100 meal that we spent. So this is a bit of a benefit. And that is also if you order in. So it doesn't matter if, for example, if you don't want to go to a restaurant, you order, take out, have a meeting at your office with a client, you can still deduct 100% of that. And then the employer credit for paid family and medical leave was extended through March 31st. So this was a credit where if you had employees and that employee got sick with COVID or had to be out or was told to quarantine because of COVID, then you can continue to pay them based off of this credit. The government was going to give you the money essentially in order to keep paying them. This credit is claimed on your payroll tax returns. So if you think that you qualify for this credit or you think somehow this credit may be applicable to you, then you're going to want to get with your payroll provider and talk with them about how to input it into their software so that you can get this credit and get the money that's associated with it. Continuing on with PPP. So the PPP process has started this week. Back on Monday, the SBA did open the PPP portal for first and second time draws. However, it's only limited right now to a select number of lenders and qualified applicants. So they are trying to target the hardest hit low income communities first to get them money. So they're only allowing certain community banks, certain minority women-owned businesses to apply right now. It's expected by the end of this week that the full PPP application process will be open and that we can begin submitting applications. So we'll want to monitor that and figure out what's going on there. If you want a PPP, I suggest, whether it's a first draw or a second draw, I suggest doing it immediately, not waiting, not kind of, well, let me think about it. Once the money's gone, the money is gone, and there is no more, there's been no talk about funding it for a third time. If for whatever reason the money doesn't run out, there is a hard date deadline of March 31st of this year that the PPP program will officially close by March 31st. Now, there are, in addition, what can be forgiven? Monica already talked about this. You still have to maintain a 60-40 split between payroll costs and non-payroll costs. So even though the government has allowed more costs to qualify for forgiveness, we still have to have, of our bucket that we're going to submit for forgiveness, 60% of that still must be payroll costs, while the other 40% can be non-payroll costs. So let's talk about some of the other things that we can include as part of this process. So we know that from the first round, health insurance was included as part of forgivable payroll costs. And so now they've codified it, or they've put it into writing, that we can use dental, vision, disability, and group term life insurance as deductible or as forgivable PPP costs. We can also use expenses for PPP or PPE, I should say, and costs to comply with COVID-19 federal health and safety guidelines. So as Monica mentioned, this would include things like barriers, masks, or any other type of capital improvements that you had to make to your office space or your business location to comply with social distancing and things like that. We can also include as part of forgivable PPP costs any business software, payroll, accounting, any business software, cloud computing, HR will work. And then property damage related to 2020 public disturbances, and then supplier costs, as Monica kind of mentioned already. Let's keep going. PPP continued. So if you are a first-time applicant, in other words, if you did not receive a PPP loan the first time around, you can apply now for a new PPP loan. You'll want to check with your bank. Your current lender where you have a relationship may be the first place to start. But if they're not moving fast enough and you need to move faster, then you should look to online lenders. So this is what our industry is now starting to refer to as fintech or financial tech. And so they will be able to move quicker in all reality. So you're going to want to look at things like PayPal or Square or Cabbage or Bluevine or Lendio. For our clients, if you are already an existing client of Payin and Payin and you did not get a PPP loan, please contact me. We do have resources as a firm through the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, where we can access some of these online lenders a little bit quicker. Unfortunately, I need to keep this to just current clients. We're not really accepting new clients under this, but if you are a client of Payin and Payin, then contact me and we can try to push you through this process much, much quicker through an online lender. Now, what's different about PPP2 or second draw PPP loans, as the SBA is referring to it? There is a new application. It's application 2483SD, standing for second draw. They're very unique here, that's for sure. If you do go back to your existing lender and you're using your 2019 information exactly the same, you don't have to submit anything other than this new application form. You submit this new application form and away you go. You should streamline through the process much, much quicker. Now, you must show that you have a 25% decrease in gross revenue. This is top line revenue. Now, what does that really mean? I understand that means the top line, it's not the after expenses, it's top line revenue, and it's calculated based upon your traditional method of accounting. So you have to look at your tax return. How did you file your tax return? Did you file on the cash basis of accounting? Then that's how you're going to calculate gross receipts. Did you file on your tax return as an accrual basis taxpayer? If so, that's how you have to apply. You may have to pull out your tax return and look, there's going to be a box that says method of accounting, cash or accrual. And then that's how you know how to calculate your gross receipts. Now, gross receipts will not include returns and allowances. So in other words, if you had to refund clients money for returned items or things like that, we do get to reduce gross receipts for that. So you have to compare quarter 2019 to the same quarter in 2020. Now, I know a lot of you are self-employed and you may not necessarily keep financial records. How do you prove that you have a decrease in 25% gross receipts? Well, there's a couple ways that the SBA has said that you can do this. You could do this using financial statements. That would be the easiest and the best. So hopefully you've got a bookkeeper, hopefully you're keeping financials, and we could just do a quarter-to-quarter comparison. If you don't have that, then we can pull out bank statements, and we can pull out all 2019 bank statements, all 2020 bank statements, and start looking and calculating gross receipts that way. If you're self-employed and you still don't want to do that, the SBA is allowing you to compare your 2019 tax return to your 2020 tax return. As long as you were in business for all of 2019 and in business for all of 2020, then you can compare your 2019 tax return to your 2020 tax return. And as long as your gross receipts has a decrease of 25%, that will qualify as well. So if we go that route, you just need to know that, hey, you are going to have filed your 2020 tax return, which means you may want to get on it sooner rather than later. Let's see. Again, you must have used or will use all of your PPP money from round 1 before you get the funding for round 2. I believe you can still apply and submit the application without having used all the money, but by the time you get the money for PPP 2, you have to have used all of the PPP 1 money. Let's see, again, if you're in the restaurant and hospitality business, your NAICS code must start with a 72. If that is applicable, you will qualify for a higher PPP draw 2 loan or second draw loan. If you're applying for a second draw loan and that loan is less than 150, you do not have to prove at the time of application that you have a 25% decrease in revenue, but you will have to prove the 25% decrease when you go to apply for forgiveness, or if the SBA were to come ask you. So while you may not have to prove it right this second that you have a 25% decrease, just know that at some point you are going to have to prove it. This is not just someone's going to look the other way. And then when applying for your second draw PPP loan, you have a couple options. We can look at your 2019 payroll and use that, or we can look at your 2020 payroll, and if that would result in a higher PPP loan, we can certainly do that. So we have some options when it comes to PPP 2, what payroll costs we look at. So you could theoretically get a second draw PPP loan that was greater than your first, but it might slow down the process a bit because we're going to have to submit new documents and things like that to the lender. All right, so there is a simplified process now for all PPP loans of $150,000 or less. I think Monica mentioned between 50 and 150,000. I think I need to disagree with that. I believe this simplified process is for all loans of 150,000 or less. So there was an application process for 50,000 loans or less that was easy, shall we say, but this is even simpler. So, but I believe this program covers all loans of $150,000 or less. So right now, we don't have guidance on this. The SBA has been given 24 days to come out and design the one-page application and design the guidance and provide it to lenders. So right now, we're still waiting for that guidance. We're still waiting for the form, and I haven't seen a copy of it yet. It's expected to come out by the end of the month. And once that comes out, what you'll need to do is sign into your lender's portal, answer the questions, make the certifications, and then submit it back to the bank. You will have to state that you complied with all PPP requirements. You'll need to state your loan amount. You'll need to state how much you spent on payroll costs, and then how many employees were saved or retained because of this. Now, you have to keep all the records for at least 4 years, as Monica mentioned, and the SBA still has the right to audit you. So even if this is a simple, certification, and you say in your mind, hey, I'm just going to go answer all the questions yes and be done, well, just know you could still get audited and you could still have to provide all these documents. So at the very least, you want to gather as much documentation as you can in case you are audited in the future by the SBA. Some other considerations Monica mentioned, and she may have some more information than I do, but they will restart the EIDL grant program to low-income, minority, and hardest-hit communities. I don't have any details on that quite yet. And then I wanted to talk about some possible changes that the Biden administration has signaled they may end up instituting. But before I say this and go over this and everyone starts rolling their eyes, oh, we've got a Democrat in the White House, we're going to see higher taxes. Well, I think we were going to see higher taxes no matter what. We can't spend trillions of dollars and not end up having to repay it at some point. I think it was Margaret Thatcher back in the 80s that said the problem with socialism is eventually run out of other people's money. And right now we understand, hey, we're spending money, but it's got to come from someplace. There is no such thing as free money. Money comes from someplace, and eventually it has to be repaid. So how does it look like it might get repaid at this point? Well, Biden has signaled that he supports an increased corporate tax rate of 28%. He wants to up the individual tax rate back to the original 39.6%. This would be on those making more than $400,000. He wants to increase capital gains rates on those making more than $1 million. So right now, capital gains rate on people earning over $250,000 is 20%. And so Biden would increase that for those making more than $1 million. He's also signaled possible increases to Social Security tax for those earning over $400,000. So it's kind of like a donut. In other words, you would pay Social Security tax from $0 up to, it's like 130,000-ish right now. Then it would stop for a period of time until you reached 400,000, and then 400,000 and beyond, you would then pick up and have to pay Social Security tax again on your all income over 400,000. Biden also wants to increase the child tax credit. Right now, it's at $2,000. I haven't seen the number that he's proposing, but that's probably welcome news. And then this is new that I had not seen, is he wants to institute a first-time homebuyer credit of $15,000. This was probably a lot like for those of us that were around in 08, 09 when the Great Recession happened and the government came out with these loans, interest-free loans to help first-time home buyers. This is kind of the same thing, only this would be a full credit. So lastly, some conclusions. The PPP application, we want to start with your lender, go to online business. We can assist with your first or second draw loans, assuming you're an existing client. It's unlikely, I've gotten some questions that, hey, is the IRS going to postpone some tax deadlines? It's very unlikely that that's going to happen this year. It's just probably not going to happen. We're all used to kind of operating in Corona land. So we're just going to have to make do with what we have. If you do end up needing to pay or make an estimated tax payment, we do suggest you make that payment electronically at the IRS website, or there's a number of online places where you can make that payment. The IRS is experiencing significant delays. Last we heard they were 3 months behind opening mail, which means that if you mail a check, it's going to sit there for 3 months and not get opened. And then you don't know, is it lost in the mail? Did they even receive it? Legal, accounting, and banking resources are stretched very thin. You are going to have to do some effort on your part. I'm trying to get to everybody, help as many people as possible, but sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and sometimes you're going to have to push and push and push and find and research information on your own in order to get what you need. Again, the government government is changing the rules all the time. Sometimes the answers aren't available, or sometimes the answers aren't what you want, but we will try our very best to get you what you need. And then lastly, please be patient. We're all doing our best and trying to help. So again, here is my contact information. Please feel free to call, send me an email. We're happy to answer any questions that we can and help where possible. So I appreciate it, Monica. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I will turn it back over to you and let you take over.
Jason, thanks so much. That was good information. I did want to just comment on the streamline forgiveness. So yes, correct. It is the same application. The caveat is in October of last year, SBA issued guidance that if you did receive a PPP loan of $50,000 and less, that if you were not able to retain employees or you had to reduce hours, you'd get like a free pass. So that was the added caveat, but it is the same application. Yeah.
All right, perfect.
So thank you for that. So we've got a number of questions. So Jason, I'm going to start off with the tax question that came in. And the question is, if you owe taxes for 2019, will they withhold the stimulus?
The answer to that is no. There is no plan to hold back stimulus if you owe prior taxes, or if you have a child support, a garnishment, or anything like that. The IRS has said they will send out the money despite those items.
Thank you for that. Just a couple comments on the PPP second draw. So because I think one thing to keep in mind, because the budget allocation is less than half of what it was previously, this money is scheduled to go quicker. So even though SBA is saying it's going to go until March 31st, I anticipate it probably will not last that long. So as Jason mentioned, use other resources. Contact your bank or lender first and foremost. They are not taking applications yet. Like Jason mentioned, it's very specific to CDFIs, minority financial institutions, because the SBA is rolling these out in phases because a lot of these communities were not able to get that funding last time. And so check with your lender or bank first on those. And I would encourage you to apply with the same lender and bank if they're ready to take those applications in. If they are not, then I would encourage you to not wait and to seek another direction. Let's see, let me go back to questions here. So I think some of this we answered. If the idle advance was already deducted and the PPP loan repaid, will there be a refund? So I know, Jason, you did talk about if there's any refunds, it's going to go from SBA directly to the lender first. And then if there's any overpayment, then the lender would get it directly to the borrower.
Correct, that's my understanding.
Okay, we talked about that one. Yes, a recording will be made available, so that will be available. You mentioned okay, we talked about the PPP forgiveness application. So I'm surprised we don't have any other questions. I think we both did just a great job that no other questions have come through, Jason.
It's clear as mud, right?
So Jason, again, I want to thank you so much. I did want to highlight just a couple things here. We are, as I mentioned, we are doing a series of webinars. We're continuing to do that. So for those of you on the call that may be interested, our next webinar is next week on the 19th. It's going to be an R&D tax credit. So if you built a prototype, anything dealing with a new product that you've developed for your company, this is probably one of those tax credits that's not very well known. So we're going to be talking about that next week on the 19th. And then on the 21st and 28th, we have a two-part business credit series, and registration for all of these webinars is on our website, which is nevadabusinessadvisors.com. And then in February, I know a number of you participated in webinars last year. We had a whole series on federal government contracting. This is a continuation of that series. So the entire month of February, it will be a weekly webinar specifically focused on federal government contracting. And then I think we have another question that popped in, Jason. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the comments of a great presentation. Really appreciate it. So if you're interested in applying for a second job PPP loan, you know, Jason mentioned lenders that he will have for his clients, but Nevada Business Advisors, we actually went into an agreement as of Friday of last week with a Midwest bank. They're a small community bank out of the Midwest, and we did that in order to be another lending option for businesses. So if you are interested in applying, please go to nevadabusinessadvisors.com. There is a button that says, yes, I'm interested. You just have to fill out the form, and that is available. So again, it is a second option if you don't have one.
So the one
and
thing
then,
I
of course, what we do is
if I can make one,
Jason, go ahead.
If I can make one comment, kind of like before, while you can only get one PPP loan or one second draw PPP loan, that will not preclude you from filing as many applications as possible to whoever will get there first, so that you get money before it runs out. So by all means, yes, use Monica. If she's able to, if she's got that small bank that can move quickly and get your application in, yes, 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 use it. That is a great tool and resource. So a lot of these bigger banks move much, much slower. And so if you're not getting any response, then we got to move on. And Nevada Business Advisors, some online banks, we got to, wherever we'll move the quickest.
Thank you, Jason. So this is my contact information. Again, if we can be a resource, if we can be of help, if you have any questions, nevadabusinessadvisors.com, 702-805-8900, and our main email is info@nevadabusinessadvisors.com. So again, on behalf of myself, Nevada Business Advisors, Jason, again, thank you with PIN and PIN CPAs. We thank you for joining in this morning, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. So thank you, everyone. Be safe. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.